From the Black Swan Media Studios, deep inside a secret underground bunker, we're speaking to freedom-loving patriots from all around the country and the world. Welcome to the Resistance. This is John Crump, live.
Okay, guys, we are here, and there were supposed to be two guests today. I'm going to bring on Rich right here. Rich is not a guest. He is a co-host and a producer. But there's supposed to be two guests today, Marc Victor of Attorneys on Retainer, and he was going to discuss disagreement that he had with another libertarian known as Matthew Larassier, Fudd Busters. And Matt will discuss everything that is going on with his views and contrast them with Marc Victor's, even though Marc Victor is not here. He was supposed to be here, like I said, but he decided that it was best for him not to come on the show.
Hey, he was busy.
But I posted the email that I got, so you guys can make up your own mind. It's also in the description, so you guys can make up your own mind whether it's legit or not. That is up to you to decide. I'm not going to take a position on either way, but this is Matt Larassier of Fudd Busters. So
Good morning.
Let's go ahead and get on with it. First thing I want to ask you, Matt, is about something that Marc constantly said. And he always talked about a reasonable risk. If it's a reasonable, and an unreasonable risk, and if it's unreasonable risk, you have every right to ban stuff.
So, yeah, I watched your whole exchange with him. It was really interesting because I was trying to understand what his philosophy is. And there's like little bits of various libertarian thinkers in the things he was saying, but I don't want to dog on the guy too hard, but I think he was taking bits that he had read from different thinkers and then combining them without being concerned about the way they were being combined. So the idea of it's funny. The idea of these unreasonable risks, and he kept couching it in terms of communities, right? He kept saying, oh, well, if a local community decides this, then that, right? And so he's incorporating this like kind of bizarre adoration of the English common law.
Only if I get only if I get like a royalty.
Yeah, no, you gotta, yeah, you guys talk to John if you want your own office portrait. And so there's this like, God, it's so hard to explain. And I wish he was here because I really wanted to engage with him about why he thinks that way. But so there's this idea that under the common law of nuisance, people can, and to a certain extent, I agree with like 1%. Okay, I agree with 10% of the words he was using. I agree with 0% of the way he was assembling the words, right? So there's an idea that, so let's take a step back. Why did he keep saying local communities? Well, there's a philosophy that the further you get away from the benefit, right? And so here's the way we teach this, right? So imagine I've got $1, right? And I want this $1 to be spent for my benefit. So who's the best person to spend that $1? Is it me, right? Is it my mom? Is it John? Or my state representative or the federal representative, right? And so each step further from the interest you get, the more perverse the incentives get, right? And when you go all the way to somebody who has no idea who I am, it's going to be really perverse, and the money is going to be more spent in their interest versus mine, right? That's the idea there. And so the idea is that the smaller a governmental unit is, the better it is suited to make these kinds of trade-offs. But when you apply that to gun restrictions, though, you're necessarily throwing the concept of a right into the garbage. Because he kept saying, oh, well, if the local community decides you can't keep a gun loaded around children or this and that and the other thing, it makes zero sense in a common law context, because you would have to presuppose that there was no such thing as negligent entrustment in that jurisdiction, that there was no such thing as murder, right? There's no such thing as criminal negligence in that district. So, and you have to lose all those things to be able to get around the fact that you are still implicating a natural person's right to direct their own bodily autonomy. And I just don't think that there's a way to logically square that without saying, okay, I don't actually think that the Second Amendment right exists against municipal entities or like quasi-governmental units. And there's a lot of libertarians that think that the Constitution should have never been applied against the states. Being a person of, like having some black in my, racial makeup,
we gotta finally get an answer to that.
What?
Do we finally get an answer to your ethnicity?
Well, there's a partial answer, right? But I take some exception to the idea that that local government can decide whether or not you have rights. I don't think that's a great way to do it. I think that the 14th Amendment, even though it hasn't been interpreted correctly, it did perfect the Constitution in tying the hands of state and local governments from infringing your rights. So, but I don't know whether his idea is that, oh no, I'm an originalist and I believe the Constitution was perfect and should have only applied against the federal government. And people who think that generally say is, oh, well, because if you don't like the local restrictions, you can just move. I think that's a pretty stupid way of looking at it, right? Because that's the same thing as saying, oh, if you don't like it here, move to another country. Well, it just so happens that this is the best one, and it's still not that great in terms of protecting our rights. So I do think that the whole... Can you hear the dog too terribly much?
A little bit.
Hold on, let me go.
I can hear it, but it's fine.
Okay,
Who
yeah.
cares?
She's letting me know that people exist outside the door. But yeah, I guess, does that answer that question? That's me being charitable with his, where his mind might possibly be.
Well, I was kind of shocked. Like, he went to a couple of things, like, they always say Social Security is the third rail. Don't talk about Social Security. But like, he hit on age of consent and, keeping minorities out of neighborhoods. And I'm like, dude, why would you go these places?
Fascinating. But like, I just want to also push back. I want to speak in his defense real quick, because he's from Attorneys on Retainer, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of people saying, trying to say, oh, well, they're not as good as this other, whatever the other ones are, USCCA or whatever. And I think that's very wrong to say. I think they are all equally horrifying scams. They're all great pyramid schemes that I would have loved to get in on the ground floor of and be on a yacht somewhere. Save for my conscience, I might have done something like that. But no, I think Attorneys on Retainer is exactly as idiotic a stupid scam as USCCA, as US Law Shield, as all of these other things that purport to offer insurance for protection against intentional conduct, which is illegal to insure. And that's why they can, whenever they want, just pull out, right? And go,
they're not insurance.
Right. Oh, yeah, we're not insurance, right? But everybody who buys it thinks they're buying insurance. And there's a reason they say they're not insurance. And it's because it's totally illegal to provide such insurance. And because it's totally illegal to provide such insurance, you have no protection when they don't cover your claims. So you're basically like throwing $50 a month or whatever into the garbage while the garbage is on fire and saying, well, I really hope the garbage can is cool and decides that I'm cool in the event that I need this flaming garbage can. Whereas you could have just put that money into index funds or something and then had more than enough to cover, a stand your ground motion or whatever the case may be if you, in the event you have to use your firearm. And I don't want to sit here and say it's not very likely that you'll have to use your firearm to defend yourself, because the data research that I've done myself, turns out that actually every year 1 in 100 people will experience it, and that like resets. So no, you should be prepared for something like this to happen, and you should just govern yourself and not like execute the person. And generally you'll be okay. And in the event that you're not, if you would put that money and wisely invested it every month, I think you would have more than enough money to deal with it if the time came. So because he's not here, I have to throw those lances out into the ether, and hope that I can convince even one person not to set $50 on fire, personally enriching these idiots.
So basically, you said to be nice to him, and then you said his
no, he's exactly as good as all the other scams. He's like they should not be compared to. It is very wrong to suggest that one is better than the other. They are all equal. They are all equal in stealing from you.
Yeah, AOR is not showing up. Yeah. What do you think about the idea of we can regulate cars so we can regulate guns?
It's idiotic.
Well,
I mean,
cars
no
are the
better...
Third Amendment. What amendment is cars? The right to automobiles.
And like this idea, oftentimes is rooted in the right to travel, right? So you presumptively have a right to travel along state lines, and then people misunderstand that, right? You do have a right to exit from one state into another. That doesn't mean that you get to like drive a flaming tank on your surface streets that were created by your local government, right? So there's levels of nuance here that are lost on people who equate these things. The other interesting point is that, like, when people talk about cars and the way they're regulated really pervasively for externalities. So for those forces that, like, externalities are the type of things that we like to get insurance for, like, you know, hurricanes or, you know, natural disasters and accidents, things that can happen. Cars have this kind of like unique situation where they're hilariously dangerous, right? You know, we are at the end of the day soft bags of blood, and then we put ourselves into these multi-ton steel things and have them travel down the roadways way faster than we were ever designed to go. But it's incredibly useful, so we recognize it's like, okay, we're all going to do this hilariously dangerous thing, but we're going to agree to do these certain regulations, such as having insurance, because we recognize the inherent utility in these things. Firearms do not have that same type of risk-reward payoff. Firearms have a natural utility in that they are, frankly, the best way to defend individual life and autonomy. But the ordinary use and having of a firearm, like carrying a gun, does not have the same risk profile as driving a 2-ton steel box amidst other blood bags, right, in close proximity. There's necessary risk that's happening whenever you're moving a vehicle, whereas there's implicit risk when you're just carrying a gun. And that risk is predicated on your intentional actions, right? Or the intentional actions of a bad doer if they were to take your gun and what have you. But to suggest that, like, driving the steel box, which depends on several hydraulic lines to be kept in good order in order for it to not just kill everything around it, is the same as having a gun in your waistband or in your home is stupid. They're not really, it's not really an intelligent comparison to make. Yeah, and also, like you said, we're talking about an enumerated right versus a penumbral right, right? Like, you certainly have a right to acquire a car. Where does it lie on the hierarchy? You know, all rights are supposed to be equal, yes, but that's not how it's ever been borne out in any system, right? Rights wind up having a hierarchy, and so your right to, you know, you certainly have a right to have a car, but, and this is something he was trying to get, right? He was trying to get at the, you know, your rights end where my nose begins. And that's the concept of when I have the right to swing around a stick in the hammer, right? Or swing around a stick in the forest, unless your nose is there, right? But when you're swinging the stick, right, it's a little bit different. Like, you don't, but here's the thing. He's suggesting that, oh, and because of this, naturally it's okay to regulate guns. Well, hold on. Do we have to regulate the stick? Or is it enough to say that battery exists and assault exists, and that's sufficient regulation already on your conduct? Because to get to the tools, you necessarily have to go down the slippery slope that we've seen England ride down, where they've ridden the gun thing all the way to the end, and so now it's background checks for knives and this sort of thing.
Screwdrivers.
It's great, yeah. There's recently a new measure passed that if you're going to buy a knife online, you have to like submit your photo ID and then a video of yourself to confirm that you're the knife guy, right? That's where these ideas go, and the root of it, not to belabor the point too much, is that when you fail to disconnect the instrumentality of the gun from the crime, which would be murder, aggravated bodily harm, etc., that's the only way you start to think, okay, well, no, we can regulate the guns because elsewise bad things might happen. You're forgetting that, no, for thousands of years we've been dealing with this, right? And we've had mechanisms that have worked kind of decently for dealing with them for all this time.
All right. How about another issue?
Also, I have a quick question for you. Why does he talk like that? Does he just do that?
Who?
That guy. The guy that was supposed to be here. I wanted to ask him why he talks like that. Why does he talk like that?
I have no idea.
You don't know like the way that he talks? It's all like different. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying, but I have no idea.
Yeah, I would really like to know if he like always does that or if it's like an act. Because that would like I could feel the strain in my vocal cords, the way he was doing, the way he was communicating, and there's no way I could do that.
Yeah. One of the other things I wanted to get your opinion on is something that he said. He said, well, they should be able to say that if you want to own a 50 that you have to get training, or you have to get training if they decide if you want to own a gun, like mandatory training, as long as it's not excessive. If it's like a 4-hour class, it's all right.
Yeah. And then you pointedly said, well, who decides what's excessive? And this train of thought, right, and so here's the other thing. He never made clear when he was talking about communities whether he meant local governments or whether he meant like an HOA, right? Because a common point in libertines, which is like, I'm a career libertarian, right? And we always have this pejorative term where we refer to people who would rather talk about like, drugs and the age of consent and things as libertines, because they're not too interested in the philosophy of rights and governance, more interested in, well, I want to do what I want to do in my backyard, right? And that's a fair position to hold, right? But a lot of libertine people very quickly get to this, well, I should be able to say that, no, what did he say, blacks or Jews or whatever, in my home, because it's my home, and no one has the right to, and like I have a bundle of rights as a property owner, and nobody, blah, blah, blah. Right, and that's true, right? So
who will do our accounting? I mean, how are we going to get our taxes done?
Right, well, and that's the thing is in your home, right? That makes perfect sense. And then the question is, because he said, as a group of people get together and decide this, well, what did he mean? It sounded like he was talking about local government, but he might have been saying is like, oh no, if a group of people get together and then basically you've got an HOA, and that's a weird like way to take that, because the idea is if you've got enough people to agree that they can bind each other, but then the question becomes, does it have to be 100%, right? And if it's 100% agreement, why do you need the authority to extend to the group as opposed to the individuals, right? Because presumably if it was just a group of homeowners and each of them was racist, well, who's to argue against that? Don't go to their house. The way he was making that argument seemed to suggest to me that should apply to a local government, and I think that's silly and wrong, because they were talking about arms of the state. The local government inherits its authority from the state. This is a So I don't understand the philosophy.
So let me ask you, we talk about HOA.
Got to drink your Tsingtao before the tariffs hit, boys.
Uh-oh.
If we're talking about HOAs, do you believe that HOAs should be able to ban guns?
No, I mean I don't think HOA. I think HOAs are a disgusting artifact of Spanish law that was somehow inherited into this country.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah, no, so they shouldn't exist, right? But to the extent they do exist, here's the
So
thing.
I kind of, and I live in Jupiter Farms, where
Yeah.
when I moved in, my neighbor had a bunch of boats and trucks on blocks,
Right.
and if I stood at a particular part of my property, I could see his junkyard. I
Right.
just didn't stand there and dwell on it. I don't care.
Yeah.
Do what you want. Doesn't bother me.
Yeah, no, and that's why I wound up moving someplace without an HOA, because, like, God forbid, I have an S10 axle in my front yard for 2 years. Oh, woe is me. I was going to put it in eventually, but that actually did happen to me.
I get to the super chats in a little bit, guys. Just
but yeah, no, HOAs are interesting, right? Because they do exist. They are a weird corruption of the English law. But to the end of the day, like an HOA banning guns, well, what can that really do? It only, and the reason I think they can't is because the
Enforce
only
it.
way,
Enjoy enforcing it.
exactly, the only way you can do that is through the state. The only way you can ultimately do that is to ultimately trespass the individuals from the property that they've owned. And who's going to enforce your trespass? Well, it has to be the government. And the moment the government comes in, they're not going to give force to that, right? Well, they shouldn't. I know that this was something that the Everytown scholars or whatever wrote about, that this is what, this is the next thing, is we need to have like HOAs doing this. I think this is a great reason that states should pass constitutional amendments banning these entities. But, I'm the S10 axle guy, right? I'm the person you don't want in your neighborhood.
I think the federal government should ban Bloomberg from having armed security or owning a firearm.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to say that I respect the rights even of my worst enemies, despite what I will mutter to myself in private. So I'm not going to say I agree with you, but I'm gonna smile to myself when I hear you say it.
all right. How about safe storage laws?
It's retarded. It's because like you're taking away your necessary I don't understand how you can be a libertarian and support safe storage laws, because, and the guy made this point a lot. He said, well, it's up to the child, right? And it's down to the child, right? How mature is the child? And I think the question of whether or not it's safe to store a firearm any given way around children is down to how you've raised your children. I've met 5-year-olds that were way better with guns than many of the people that I have the misfortune of being on the range with, right? I think it should be up to the parent to decide what goes on there. And if a mistake happens, guess what? Negligent entrustment has existed for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. You don't need a new law specifically regulating the firearms conduct, because if your conduct was that bad, right? If you knew that this child was, and child is that's the context everyone brings it up in, right? But if you knew that there was a child that could access your stuff, you knew they were irresponsible because of the way they behave on Roblox or whatever, and you left your gun unsecured anyway, well, you're already exposed to liability for that. So why do we need a separate criminal law? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. You're making it extra. It is not legal to just leave unsecured guns when you know it's like dangerous. That isn't something that you're just allowed to do willy-nilly. There are consequences for that. Generally the common law imposes consequences for unreasonable behavior. I don't know why we would need a separate law to make you extra super duper liable for that. And the only change that safe storage laws make is exposing you to criminal liability, as opposed to just compensatory liability for the results of your negligence, right? For the results of your bad actions.
Yeah, it seems like he was trying to say, if you don't store your guns the way I like you to store them, you're putting me in danger and you're aggressing against me.
So yeah, and I think the idea is I don't know how much. So the way I listen to his philosophy, right, and I wish he was here. I wish he was here, because I'm sure he could competently defend all his points, except the ones about his scam organization, because I'm completely right. But in terms of his philosophy, yes, he's right. Free Tate. In terms of his philosophy,
on Tate and Matt and all them this morning.
You what?
I did a video on all Tate
Oh.
and Matt and Justin this
All right,
morning.
cool.
How they need to be.
Yes, they need to win their appeals.
Yeah.
But what was I just saying?
You're talking about the aggression.
Oh yeah, the aggression principle. So these people who make these types of points, I always question. It's like, are you really libertarian or are you a feudalist? And what you actually want, what it sounded to me is what he actually wants is a very weak emperor so that he can be the shogun, right, and rule his fief the way he wants to.
See, that I always have a beef with gatekeepers. Now, if Crump was the gatekeeper or you were the gatekeeper, I think it'd be okay. But when you retire, who's coming up next? I don't like that establishment principle.
Well, this is why
and I'm like,
it didn't work.
I like to say, hey, everybody has the right to keep and bear arms. Should they get training? Yes, but I don't want that to be the gatekeeper.
I don't want that to be mandatory.
Right.
No.
Right.
No, and you made such great points, John. I mean, you were really slaying that dude. It was brutal. But yeah, I really regret that he's not here because I thought it would have been a lot of fun. He did also send me a very weird email. Like right after you suggested this, I told you guys about it. Asking to have a phone call with me to discuss, because he saw that I worked at the Cato Institute and he like name dropped 4 people that had been retired but before I even worked there, right? And he was like, I want to talk to you about their ideas and the non-aggression principle, and I'm writing a new book on all this, and I'm going to change the world, and I want to talk to you. And I'm like, that's weird, we can talk after the debate. And then a couple days later he backed out.
It was like 11 o'clock on Saturday.
Yeah, because but I thought that was weird, right? One, backing out, like, okay, whatever, right? Because he's busy and he's got clients, right? Like, unlike me, right? Oh, I don't have clients. I didn't just deal with a defensive gun use situation this morning.
Well,
right?
wasn't his idea to bring on a lawyer that
Yes.
disagree with him?
It was his entire idea. And you said, is this Deo code? Absolutely. But whatever. It's frustrating because the viewers wanted a fight.
That impression was spot on.
Again, and I already feel the pain here. I don't know how he does it, but yeah, that I think his philosophy is actually again he wants to be the shogun, and he wants a very weak emperor so that he can shogun the way he wants over his little farmers, right? And I'll know what's good when I see it because I'll be the shogun, right? The problem with that philosophy is you're not prepared for what happens when you're not the shogun, right? You're not prepared for what happens when you are actually the rice farmer, and they take all your rice. It's suboptimal.
Yeah, it really is. One of the other things that they always say is, there's limits to all rights. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater, which I think I always hear from the anti-gun side.
You actually can, is the funny thing.
Yeah.
Like, whether or not there are actual consequences that flow from what you did, you may or may not be liable for them. But you certainly have the right to yell fire in the crowded theater. There's never been a court case saying you don't have that right.
It's such a bad argument. It's funny. The second I hear somebody postulate that, I'm like, all right, you know nothing.
Yeah, there is no crowded theater exemption. The fact that it's protected conduct doesn't mean that if you cause injury through your protected conduct, that you can't be liable, right? Correct. It's unquestionable. Like, none of us would disagree. Here's what I'll do. Like, you agree with me, right, John? John, we agree that you have the right to a gun, right?
That really pisses me off when people.
No, you agree that we have the right to a gun, right?
Yeah.
But if I shoot someone, that I don't have the right to do that.
Well, it depends on the situation.
Well, no. Let's say I shoot. I'm being silly. I'm being a silly boy, and it's the 4th of July, and I'm having a silly time with my Draco in the yard, and a bullet lands and hits somebody. Now, you can say I had the right to be using my gun and the right to shoot it. That doesn't mean I had the right to injure somebody.
Correct.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that saying, all right, idiot, you're going to face the consequences of your actions, right? The reasonably foreseeable harms that could have resulted from what you're doing, that's not an infringement on the right at all. Like, I don't think any of us would say that if you accidentally shoot someone with a gun, you have to make it right? You have to pay for their medical care or whatever. I don't think any of us would call that an infringement.
Yeah, but
Right,
that means you're
right.
not a Second Amendment absolutist if you believe that.
Yeah, that's what he kept saying. And that doesn't make sense because no, you have the right. You have the right to engage in the conduct. You don't have the right to be free from the consequences.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that was the big disagreement. When he's like, well, what? Because when I was talking to him, he was like, well, what happens if that 8-year-old shoots a neighbor? I was like, well, then, then the parent would get in trouble for letting the 8-year-old shoot the neighbor.
Yeah.
I
There's a
mean,
difference between freedom from consequences and, do you have the right? Yeah. If there's negative consequences, can that adversely affect you? Yes.
Yeah. No, and I mean, because he said find a Second Amendment absolutist, right, lawyer, and I was very humbled when you guys were like, I know a guy, because yeah, I do. I've fought for machine gun rights repeatedly, right? I am an absolutist. I think that you have the right to have any mechanism of projecting force in any way. That doesn't mean that I think that, I guess I can't think of a way that me saying, yeah, if you do something stupid and hurt someone with your toy, you have to make it right and be held responsible. It doesn't necessarily mean going to jail, mind you. I don't understand how that could possibly be me not being a Second Amendment absolutist.
I don't know. I think it's almost like you could. His view of a Second Amendment absolutist is you can do anything with the gun. You can go shoot someone.
Yeah,
and since you use the gun, there's nothing that you only.
You can leave loaded guns in the park, right? You can trade them with homeless people for cigarettes, even though they were saying I will shoot someone if I get a gun. Right? That's the suggestion, and I think that's just a little silly because and you put it very well. The freedom, and also let's be clear. I think the Second Amendment is too narrow. It only says keep and bear arms. I think it should have said keep, bear, purchase, produce, been as granular as conceivable, store, hold, keep in a conveyance, without a conveyance, right? But none of that has anything to say about, here's an example. Libel, right? Has anyone ever said that a libel
infringes on freedom of speech?
Infringe on freedom of speech? No. Right? And so how come just because it involves a gun, it has to implicate the Second Amendment? Does that make, and again, are you, so the fact that you think it's okay for the government to say cars should have seatbelts means you're not that's not a good example because I don't know many car absolutists, right? I do drive a car without seatbelts. I have a 64 Corvair, and I would probably get very unreasonable if I was told I couldn't drive
the
it.
coupe or the van?
Convertible.
Yep.
4-speed.
Yeah. It's like the crime is like if I go shoot someone, the crime is murder.
Mm-hmm.
If
it's not murder, aggravated harm, or battery.
Yeah, I'm saying that is against the law. I used a gun. The gun is just the tool.
Yep.
So just because I use a tool doesn't mean that if I say, yeah, it still should be charged with murder or aggravated assault, whatever.
Right.
It doesn't mean that I'm not a 2A absolutist because it's the action that's regulated.
And here's the other thing, right? So, and I've talked about this before. When you think about rights, there's two ways to think about it. There's the right way and then there's the French way. And most of the world does it the French way, where it's listed what you can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the right way, which is the way we do it, it's here's all the things that the government cannot touch, right? And those are informed by conceptions of natural right, and they all flow from your ability to interact with yourself, right? And they're all limited to harm against another person. The difference between the theories that developed under the English common law over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and like red flag laws, which are the French way of doing things, is that one focuses retroactively on, okay, something bad happened, who's responsible? The other, which is the French way, says, if you do this, this is bad. You get locked in the cage and you have to pay money. Doesn't matter the circumstances. If you did it, it was bad. So positive statutory law that says these are the situations where it is not reasonable to, store a gun, that's what all safe storage laws are, right? They all say, known to be accessible by a minor, not locked in an approved dingus. That's how they say it. Are you going to tell me that's better than a reverse inquiry that says, okay, the kid got a gun and shot somebody. What happened? Could it have been prevented? Right? And the way we handle that in the tort system is we look at, okay, what is the measure that you could have taken to prevent this? And is that, this is called the hand formula, is the burden of taking that measure greater than the harm multiplied by the probability of that harm, right? I think that's a pretty fair way of looking at things. And none of it has anything to do with your rights, because we're looking at the harm that resulted, period, end of story. And then again, this is totally compatible with the concept of self-defense, because a criminal action is necessarily, under the common law, an intervening cause, right? So the criminal action, right? So if you're out shooting, your target shooting, right? And then somebody gets up and tries to mug you, and in the course of your target shooting, you turn and sweep and you hose them. Well, your original shooting doesn't matter anything. The new causation is the criminal action. Knowing that you were doing something that was dangerous to somebody else's life, liberty, or property has inherent within it certain risks, including being hosed, right? And so it's all compatible. And I think it's so beautiful that we have a system where that is truly almost universally compatible. And yet our result is to say, oh no, but I think that I like to store my guns this way. And so if you don't, you get to get locked in the special cage.
Yeah, I think one of the you brought up red flag law, so let's go there.
Mm-hmm.
His point was, and since he's not here to debate, I just have to give his point and let you respond. But his point was that we don't have to wait until that person does something or makes a direct threat. We can take his guns away before he becomes dangerous.
I cannot undertake to find something consistent with English law that supports that idea, right? That's a thought crime. Has the harm occurred?
Yeah, brought out pre-crime and like that.
Well, and then he was also saying if there's no victim, there should be no crime. But so the victim includes possible victims? I mean, there are possible victims, right? Like, I just waved my arm. There could have been someone. Somebody could have been there, right? It's a little silly.
Yeah,
it's being a silly goose.
Yeah, it's something that I don't really.
You can square it if you believe that there's some unit, and it wasn't clear whether he was talking about the HOA or the local government, but if you think that there's some unit that can regulate externalities, that can regulate potential harms, as against any right? Like that has better authority against individual rights to regulate against externalities. And if you have a originalist view of the Constitution, pre-14th Amendment, Well, then there's a legal basis for that. It's not a very good legal basis because every theory of conception of rights, aside from the French ones, is that these come from God, right? And that there are certain things that are just without the authority of any other man to impact. And it's kind of funny when you look at, when you look at some actual even French legal philosophers, the common consensus, well, it's obvious that there are things that even civil law cannot touch, such as the ability of a man to defend against unlawful force. And then look where we are now. Apparently what is obvious has changed. I think a lot of it can be rooted in, fuck it, I'll just say it. A lot of it can be rooted in atheism. If you presuppose that if in your conception there is no higher power and the only thing that can regulate men is other men, then all of the intrusive thoughts that you experience on a daily basis are going to inform your perception of how other men should be treated. And that's how you get to throwing people's rights in the garbage because it makes you feel better. It's because you're godless and have a low IQ. It's a common issue.
Okay. One of the other things you brought up property. It seems like I didn't really go into this because we were discussing so many other things, but he said he made a statement like you can't defend property with force.
It's not true.
Yeah, I know it's not true, but there was so much other stuff that I just let that one slide.
Yeah, that's a common homism, and that's a jurisdictional issue. But
you stealing my car? Yeah, I'm.
So this is what happens when you don't fully embrace, when you want to preach the virtues of the common law without fully embracing it and understanding it, because the common law has a doctrine of proportionality. And so, then the question is, was the used force proportional to the threat?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean if they have a knife, you have to stab, right? But when somebody is carjacking you, what is implicated in a carjacking, right? There's a lot of things. They're taking the 2,000 or 2-ton steel box. That isn't a pure property situation. There's an imminence of harm situation. One of the common things you can do, well settled, burglars is considered a crime so dangerous that per se deadly force is okay. And the definition of burgling is entering the dwelling house of another with the intent to commit a felony inside. So it could be that you were going in to, sell crack or something, right? That's burglary. But if you use force to protect against a burglar, that's definitely, a property question. There's questions of property tied up into it. The classic conception of you can't use deadly force to protect pure property interest is very old cases where people took a shoplifters and they shot them, right? That's not a very proportional application of force, right?
Invasions are
In
different.
San Francisco, it might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, home invasions are different.
No, 100% different. Carjackings are 100% different. Horse theft, right? This is one that was understand. If you try to steal someone's horse, you get holes in you. That's just what happens, right? Horses were definitely property, right? Against the interests of what became PETA, they were definitely property. So it's just not that simple. There's a lot of nuance to all this stuff, and so you don't get to hand wave away the fact that safe storage and red flags and this other things are necessarily a violation of people's rights. Again, because they target conduct before the harm has occurred, just by saying you befire the crowded theater, this deadly force property, right? It's just that doesn't make a full circle in your philosophy.
Yeah, I just didn't really get to that.
I mean, he was rapid firing. I mean, it was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna ask this because people keep on bringing it up. Is
Joe
15
Biden?
too young for age of consent?
I think 25 is too young. I mean, if I've met most people, I think most people probably never can consent. They're too dumb. I think if you don't know where you are and what things are, you probably shouldn't be able to consent. But we've decided as a nation in general, right? There's some outliers. We've decided on 18, and that's as good of it's the age of consent is like speed limits. It's an unprincipled distinction because eventually you draw a line and people will ultimately be on either side of the line. It's unprincipled, right? The concept of statutory R word, right? We're on YouTube. The concept of statutory R word, statutory heavy caress, is itself problematic because it is again one of those things where if these factors are all in play, you've gently caressed the person. I'm not mad about the way the chips lied, right? I'm not mad about the fact that 18 seems pretty reasonable. On top of the fact that, especially when most states have Romeo and Juliet laws, I feel like that covers all the bases, right? If you're 21 and you're trying to go for a 15-year-old, like, what do you have in common with that person, right? And that's a prudential thing. That's not based on any, like, the legal question there is, are you dealing with a person that has the capacity to enter into this type of agreement? Right. And so that's a hard question. And it's a question that we, a long time ago, were like, all right, here it is. And if you want to go and push on that in one way or the other, that's fine. But if you're pushing on it to go to a number down, and you've seen what people are posting on TikTok, I don't know. You know? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think we have like a severe brain rot problem, and I don't think, especially like seeing what people like, what causes people to like hold their mouth agape and clap. I wouldn't be pushing that number down. I'd be okay if we changed the law to say like, well, under the circumstances, was this reasonable? Because that's basically what Romeo and Juliet laws are, right?
Yeah.
They're set up to be that if you met a person in high school, no matter what, you should be okay. I think that's reasonable. While you were in high school, right? So it's like
not what whether if you're the teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
Teacher might be a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, and so like I think things are fine with.
So Matt, why am I not totally creeped out about you saying this, which isn't exactly what the other guy said, but I think I understand what you're saying.
I didn't know. He said something different. I didn't do it. He did not say what I said.
Same thing.
I had a complete involuntary full body shiver when I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, no, he said something very different from what I said. I said, I think it's fine. I think it's weird to push it down. However, there are certainly situations where the state should not, like, if a person like who is a senior in high school meets a freshman, I don't think the state should be arresting him if they start, gently doing whatever to each other.
17 or 18-year-old.
Yeah, but when you talk about age of consent in the vacuum, you're like, you have to imagine like a 49-year-old being with whatever.
Yeah, that's
and like terrifying. Is that a violation of right? No. Here's why. Because age of consent concerns your capacity to agree. And the common law presumes that you are not a person until you've reached certain mental capacity. That's just the way that it is, right? Mm-hmm. You're not a person who has the normal rights. Like, you are a charge of your parents, you are or of whatever your caregiver is. And so the legal theory there is you do not have the right to mess around with other people's things, right? So if you're arguing to raise the age of consent, what you're really arguing is, when does a person have full autonomy, right? Because And then it's the same thing as when do you not get to say, no, mom, I'm not going to the doctor, right? It's really the same thing. So is that infringing on your right to assemble and associate with other people? No, because you have to have the capacity to associate and the capacity to enter into agreements with other people.
Yeah, it's just
And
like you can't sign a contract at age 10.
yeah, no, it's well, you can sign it physically and the court will go, that's cute.
Yeah,
Why
but
are you trying to enforce
it's not
this?
legally binding.
Yeah. That's so cute. Look, you did a little scribbler on it. Yeah. So like the consent thing, I don't think it violates anyone's rights, because okay, it would only violate the right of a person who had definitely reached a level of maturity and an intellectual understanding to be able to enter into contracts and understand where they are and what things are, who was then prevented from doing that. Yes, like it would definitely violate that person's right. That person is not the 49-year-old. It's the the other person. And why did you not feel grossed out about that? Because I'm not like I mean, it's different to like, maybe you're aware that I'm married to an adult woman. So like, there's no like idea that these might be my like interests leaking out. I don't know.
Wow.
I'm gonna maintain my right to remain silent.
I think I will too. Yeah,
A lot of people, a lot of people when they argue for that, you're like, I'm not saying that's what he was doing, but it's like,
So I'm gonna tell a story. I think I told everybody this privately. I left New York when I was 42, and I had my first contract in Monroe, Louisiana. And somebody I've known for years, they're like, "Oh, you ought to check what the age of consent is." I'm like, "What the?" I'm like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, that's a no-go. That's an absolute.
that you're checking.
I'm like, what?
I've got friends that I got friends that in their 30s that are looking at dating 21-year-olds, and I'm like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, that's
What do you have in common with that person? Like, yeah, I think that's
maybe
gross.
Pokemon Go. I don't know.
Or maybe a lot, and maybe I should rethink my association, right? And that's my freedom. I can do that.
that could be.
I'm not violating anyone's rights by saying, I don't like who you're dating, and I don't want to talk to you anymore. You're not allowed at my house no more.
Let's get to Halo. Is Halo
Sorry.
legit? Let's see here. Likes the where can you purchase it? Only if you give me money.
That's Gino. That's Gino. Everyone say hi to Gino and go to fflpaymentprocessing.com. If you're an FFL or or love an FFL, they will save you a lot of money. fflpaymentprocessing.com. It's a good company. It's one of the good ones.
Yeah. How could the FOI card affect the super safety?
Hugely. It's over. It's over.
Love you guys. Floodbusters is the GOAT.
I am not a goat.
Okay.
Wait, what is that?
Tax sub.
What does he say?
A crump of shells could be heard hours later. Like that.
Oh. Crump.
Definitely worth the $10. And you gave $5.
He
If you gave two $5 donations.
Oh. I'll give him the Matt. Hoover.
That's funny.
Yeah,
he didn't specify which Matt.
Yes, Matt Hoover doing it.
That's good.
I will never live in an HOA, Kurt says that. And have Matt on here more. You can definitely do that. Matt and I are working behind the scenes on something that we really can't talk about too much.
Yeah, it's cool.
But
It's a pillow fort.
yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it's good. Here we go. What is this? I don't know. Just put yes or no. You guys calling AOR if you find yourself in a defensive shooting. I'm not a customer of theirs, so
Not a customer.
I will be called.
I'm trying to think of something clever. Like, yeah, I'd call him and say, "Hey, yeah, so I was in the defensive gun use and I didn't do anything dumb, so I didn't need you." Stupid.
All right, let me ask you something, and if you want to answer, you can. I'm pretty sure you will. But this is also called foreshadowing. if someone approached you and said the ATF took pictures of all my bound books, would you tell them, oh, they're allowed to do that? It's not a big deal with a personal phone.
No. No, you're supposed to provide, like, there's a certain procedure for this. I mean, taking pictures with a personal phone is odd. That's certainly odd. I've never seen that. I would have asked that person whether or not they provided a copy beforehand, because that's like fairly normal, because you don't want them to leave with your books, right? Which they try to do all the time.
Hilton Tactical, they left with his books, and
yeah, that's so insane. That's so insane. But no, I would not say that that was normal. I would say that's odd. We need to report him.
yeah, so you wouldn't say, oh, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal.
I would report that IOI to the regional, forget what they call him, regional director.
Yeah, so basically, if you were a lawyer, you wouldn't be saying, don't worry about it.
No.
Okay. There's going to be a video coming out later on this week.
Well, who said that?
What is this whole video about?
Oh, just let him do whatever. Who cares? You know, if my client came to me and said that, I'd be like, write a statement. This is how you write it. I'm sending this to the division head. And I would have sent it to the division head and said, explain yourself. Also, I want to know that this was removed from the personal phone. I want to know whether or not it was spread to anyone. That's odd, right? And if it came back and said, oh no, that was actually a departmental phone, blah, 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 and this and that and the other thing, then I would be like, okay, whatever, right? But I would definitely, my instinct would not be to, hand wave.
All right, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, that's odd. I've never seen that.
Yeah,
I have had to yell at a couple. I've had to call field offices to yell at them when they took my client's bound book away. That's happened like twice. I'm like, give it back, and then they brought it back.
Do you have one of the worst IOIs in the country down where you are?
Yes, we do.
I'll just say that. I mean, it's like
I haven't seen them in a while, though. I will say that in the past year and a half, I've had very good experiences.
Yeah,
with IOIs, not in general. Yeah, that's Hunter Biden.
ADF Firearms wants to know how much of it usually costs to have a attorney on retainer. I think it's.
I don't believe in general retainers. And people often contact me asking like, "Oh, how much do I pay you every month to just keep you on?" And I'm like, "No, keep my number. If something happens, you call me. Right? Here's generally what the different things you're worried about cost. But why would I just ingest your money when I'm not working for you?"
What's the point of retainers? Just to make sure that they have.
So generally the retainer, and there have been times where I've taken retainers because people like it makes more financial sense for them or whatever. Generally what you do with what a law firm does when they take a retainer is they're like, here's my hourly rate. I don't really trust that you're going to pay all of it. You're going to essentially prepay a bunch of it at this time, right? And so usually retainers are a one-time deal when you're doing that type of transaction. When you work with companies or you're doing ongoing support for somebody, then it's generally that, okay, you'll pay me this every month and there's prepaid this many hours. And what I do when I'm done with that is I give them a like very discounted rate, right? To basically where they're saving money, where it's like, we know you're going to use me like 5 hours every month. I'll cut the price, take 30% off and just give me this fixed amount every month. And that way, if you go under, then I win. If you go over, you win. Right.
So that brings me to the next question. My next question, since you explained that, you might have known I was going to go here.
I have no idea.
Okay. So is attorneys on retainer, do you really have them on retainer? The way
I haven't read their documents. I have not read their documents.
The traditional retainer fee works.
I don't know, unless you were in a place where they have people within their firm practicing. I don't know how you could legally do that. And I don't think they have that many people that directly work with them. I think they outsource to other law firms.
Well, I think what they do is they get sworn in to that bar.
I don't think you can get away with that.
Well, that's what they do. That's their model.
Right, but so like I don't think that you could be retained for state representation.
Oh yeah, okay,
in
yeah.
the future.
Well, that
Right.
was my question.
Unless they have a very funnily written document that like gets around the like 800 pitfalls to doing that, I would doubt it. But I have to say I have not seen it. But also, if they can deny a claim, then no, they're not on retainer. Like, if you're making claims, I don't. Because usually when you retain an attorney, it's with regard to a specific matter, or with regard to an ongoing matter. Like I've had retainers that said, with gun shops that to deal with anything involving the ATF, right? So we have something that's identified in scope of what the work is going to be. Right? To have a good legal retainer, you have to have an enforceable contract, which means it has to identify all of the elements, right? What's the consideration on both sides? What is the scope of work, etc. This type of thing is hard, right? Because it's kind of like an agreement to agree in the future, and agreements to agree are not enforceable. They're nothing. So like if you're saying, oh yeah, no, you'll pay me this much a month, and if I like your case, I'll do it. Yeah, it's not a contract. It's just words, But again, I haven't seen their contracts. If somebody wants to send me a sample one, I'll look at it and I'll make fun of it.
I'm sure you'll probably get it.
I don't know.
Sure, you're gonna get an email probably tonight with it.
That'd be funny.
Just call that a guess. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Matt, thank you. Sorry the debate thing didn't work out.
Oh, let's talk about one more thing.
Okay.
So, of course, people are asking about the EO thing with regard to Matt Hoover and Tata Damiak. I haven't seen that do anything in those cases. What I have seen is in the other cases that I have going, the government trying to indefinitely delay the resolution of the case while they think about their policies. And I saw some people posting that, the government is trying to, postpone cases that are Second Amendment cases. This is so good for the 2A. No, it's not. For example, we have a case in the Middle District of Florida which directly challenges SBR regulation, right? The government lost on a motion for preliminary injunction, appealed that, right? And we opposed it the whole way. And then I said, okay, well, if we're going to fight on the MPI, that's fine. Let's keep going on the Second Amendment issues here in district court. The government stayed proceedings, moved to stay proceedings in the district court until the 11th Circuit issued its mandate. Now the government is saying, because we're taking the Second Amendment so seriously, we want you to indefinitely delay this appeal while we think about it. And we'll let you know every 60 days what we're thinking. What about the active Second Amendment claims that we have down below that you now want to just brush under the rug for years? That's not good. It's not good. What the government can and should do in these situations is abandon its position on appeals, is settle these cases. I do not think this is a pro-2A move at all, especially in the cases we presently have going. And I think the reason they're doing that is because they don't want to be seen in arguing for things that the Biden administration did. And I don't care about how they feel and how they think their optics are. If they've changed their mind, they should change their mind. If not, they should fight. They should just keep going forward. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that the only thing I've seen this executive order do so far is attempt, and they haven't gotten their stay yet. I'll let you guys know if they do. But the only thing I've seen it do so far is them attempt to mess cases up. which is not good. And I doubt that was Trump's intention, right? Because everything, goes, the Pam Bondi and this and there and there, right? But that's what's happening right now. And no such motion was filed in Tate's case or Hoover's case.
Yeah, it looks like all the motions came from the civil division.
Yep.
Doesn't look like any of them came from the criminal division,
which is concerning. How come not?
It
should be the same thing. If you're reconsidering your Second Amendment stuff, how come in every criminal case where it's up for consideration, you're not at least trying, right, to say, wait, hold up.
Yeah.
So, Matt, I don't know if we're running a little over, but I'm wondering, as a Florida man, what are your thoughts about Pam Bondi?
I don't know anything about her.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if that's bad, but
she's pro red flag.
Is she?
Pro Parkland bill.
Yeah, Parkland.
That was a bad one.
Yeah,
that was a bad one.
And she was heavily supported that bill.
Yeah, no, the only names I remember from that because of how bad it was Corcoran, and then one other one that I've forgotten. I'm not very good at remembering politicians' names.
Simpson, the Republican.
Yeah. Corcoran was Republican too.
Yeah, but Simpson was like the head of like the legislature, and
they were locking people in rooms with the victims until they agreed to sign the bill. Like, it was messed up.
Yeah.
It was totally weird.
Okay. 688 attacks up. My grandfather was a B-17 tail gunner in World War II. He passed away this week. Rip Corporal E.T. Fudd, and bless you for your service.
Rip Corporal E.T. Fudd.
Everyone
press F in the chat.
Yeah. All right. Here, let's work the back. Okay, guys, we're gonna get out of here before we have any more questions or anything else like that. But we will we'll get out of here. All right, thanks, guys.
Have a good night.